in. We do the top button up. Yes, maybe, yeah. Hey, I'm back with less hair, making me more lightweight and aerodynamic. Hopefully that means I can release content more frequently. The overarching theme of these videos so far has been about power centralization. We've discussed power centralization in government and in the press. Today, as promised several months ago, we're going to talk about shoes. The corporate world's history is full of monopolies. Whether that is companies failing, companies being bought out, hostile takeovers, etc. And some people have argued that any monetary system always will end in monopoly. These monopolies are on the surface broken up by governmental antitrust laws. But this really comes down to how big the industry is and how deep its pockets are and how able it is to alter legislation to favor them, and how effective these antitrust laws are is a matter for another day. In an ideal system, the corporate world is kept in check by the purchasing decisions of educated, intelligent consumers making mindful decisions. Anyone who's worked drive-through at 1 o'clock in the morning will tell you the gaping hole in this idea.
I'd like to place an order.
They will tell you that consumers don't always make mindful, intelligent decisions. What should happen? Company A does a whoopsie, whether it's screwing its workers or screwing its customers or screwing the environment. Either way, someone's getting screwed. The press catches wind of this, either from a whistleblower, from some sort of investigation, and they let the people know. The people then alter their purchasing decisions, whether that's a boycott or otherwise, and stop supporting a company's bad decisions. This can't happen if the press are in the back pockets of these companies. And it certainly can't happen if consumers are buying 100 chicken nuggets and a McFlurry at 1 o'clock in the morning. The people are kept very busy, perhaps by design. We're struggling to get to work, mow the kids, or pick up the lawn from school. The idea of paying attention to consumer advocacy groups, simply reading the ingredients, or just considering the long-term ramifications of our purchasing decisions is absolutely alien to us. We just need the McFlurry. Worse still is most consumers don't realize that their purchasing decisions have power, where they pay their actual money and their attention really matters and can alter the future that we live in. They don't see it as a way of voting for the future that they want. Generally, consumers do what feels good, not necessarily what is good. While the higher mind is preoccupied with the aforementioned kids at the lawn, meanwhile the lower mind is making a majority of our small to medium purchases. Usually things like price, attractiveness of packaging, that ad I saw this morning, or convenience trump things like our own health, the state of the planet, or the sort of companies that we choose to or choose not to support. This is particularly fact when companies sell us images of clean green or wellness or social causes in their brand, when in reality their business practices are the exact opposite of that.
Privacy to us is a human right. It's a civil liberty.
He lies! Apple is handing over control of user data to China. A new report from the New York Times citing leaked Apple documents and interviews with Apple employees throws Apple's goodwill into doubt and makes their stance on security and privacy look like some kind of convenient marketing ploy.
When will the lies end?
This is doubly fact when we realize that food manufacturers spend billions every year trying to make their food more palatable or simply more addictive.
I have eaten the ribs of God.
And they invest probably even more than that in advertising to make their messaging stick in our heads better. This is in no way conspiratorial. There are laboratories full of food scientists maximizing the shelf life and the addictiveness of products, and there are rooms full of psychologists and effectively propagandists pushing and creating these advertising campaigns. I'm not blaming you, the consumer, or them, the company. Frankly, we've valued money as the thing that we are all pursuing, for better or for worse. But at least for now, the power is still within us and our wallets to make the right choices. But regrettably, we've been making the wrong decisions. But it's not entirely our fault as consumers. In order for us to make mindful decisions, we need to be adequately informed, and marketing spin is not the way to be informed. Yes, I'm sure there's regulation in place to make sure that companies can advertise to us in only specific ways, but a majority of regulation is actually written by industry, and it's a way for big companies to keep out the smaller ones. It's not really about best practices for the consumer. Our recent human history are full of examples of companies making horrible decisions for the end user just to maximize profit. As I've demonstrated in our last 2 episodes, we can't trust government to do this for us, and we certainly can't trust media. So we have to take control of our own minds and of our own purchasing decisions, and cast our votes not only on election day, but every time we purchase something. We need to look past the attractive packaging and the marketing spin and actually read the ingredients, consider the plastic, find out about the companies that we're supporting every day, and investigate our own alternatives instead of being told what to do and what to buy. We as consumers need to be more mindful of what we buy as well as how we live our lives. How often do you buy a car? 3 to 6 times in your life? How about a house? How many tubes of toothpaste have you purchased? How many disposable coffee cups are you responsible for throwing into a trash can? How many of the clothes in your closet were made by a 10-year-old in a sweatshop? These small, regular purchases, I would argue, are more important than your Tesla. These tiny decisions add up considerably over a lifetime. Yes, we could wait for government to ban plastic bags, or we could have just started using our own reusable bags and gotten to the habit ourselves, and people were doing that. And the rest of us would look at them funny. In my experience, the sort of people that really advocate government intervention are the ones that don't make good decisions for themselves. They expect someone else to force their hand, as opposed to living a disciplined life and being aware of the power that they have within themselves. They need someone else to tell them how to live, and therefore they feel the need to tell other people how to live, instead of just buying a Keep cup or taking the bus to work. But that's a subject for another time. This topic sort of brushes against the idea of a free market, as well as the democracy of a free market. I really recommend this book, Saving Capitalism for the Many, Not the Few, by Robert B. Reich. Anyway, it's been however many minutes, and I haven't even brought up my shoes. Ever since watching Back to the Future, I've considered Converse Chuck Taylors to be the epitome of cool. I'd wanted them since I was about 7, i.e. the first time I saw Back to the Future. But I was never allowed a pair because, well, my parents were first-generation immigrants, and Chuck Taylors aren't exactly cheap. When I finally could start making and spending my own money, however, I bought myself a pair. I love those friggin' shoes. I thrashed them literally every day that I wasn't in my black leather lace-ups for school. I was in my Chucks, and I wore them until my feet could taste pavement. Fast forward to my next pairs. Not my next pair, my next pairs. They were on sale, and I was thinking to myself, maybe 3's excessive. Do I really need 3? Well, these shoes are reliable. How long did it take you for you to break through your old pair? The quality's good. You've got shoes here for at least 5 to 10 years. It's not like my shoe size is going to change, and Converse is a reliable brand that makes great products.
Lies!
I had those shoes for max 3 months before this happened. On every one of them. I mentioned this problem to the people at the Chuck store, and they said, oh, they have no idea of this ever happening. Spoke to a couple of friends, yeah, they've had that problem, and I go online. Fucking everybody's had that problem. And it was after a little bit of research that I learned that Converse, an American company, was at some point purchased by Nike, which moved their production from America to Vietnam to then China. Nike, whose CEO recently defended China's use of forced slave labor, stating, we're a brand of China for China. So obviously, I'm not a fan of Nike. And since finding out about the purchase, I've obviously stopped buying Chucks. Since, as far as I'm concerned, I have no interest in supporting a genocidal regime that uses forced labor and mass surveillance to control its citizens, much to my own dismay, because I still love the way they look. Unfortunately, things like this, company purchases, takeovers, drops in product quality, and the ethical standards of companies very rarely gain major exposure. The only things the majority ever really sees about companies is advertising, or worse, advertorials, non-news dressed up like news articles to sell a product or just pump a brand. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this is not so much about the corporate sector and mindful purchasing decisions. While that is important, I think it's good to tie this idea back to the press. The media is an institution, and certain press, whether it's the Herald or the Fictionese Times or Fiction Daily, they're a brand. And once upon a time in the corporate history and in our idea of corporate culture, a brand was a shorthand for their reputation and their values. Once upon a time, you could see a brand like Converse, Apple, or Levi Strauss and think of certain things based on the quality of the product and the people that they associate with over time. And a company would once upon a time protect its brand by making sure that the services and the products that they delivered were always at a particular standard of quality. Now that the media is in the back pockets of the corporate overlords, a company no longer protects its brand with a good product and good customer service. No, they protect their brand with media spin or censorship, and this goes for shoes, food, phones, and most importantly, the press itself. Sure, the Fictionese Times may have once been a reputable brand that you could trust. Does that necessarily mean that 50, 100 years after its inception that that's still the case? It's not the same people still at the helm of these companies. Remember that. Steve Jobs has been dead for a long time. Once again, the watchdogs are asleep at the heels of those they're meant to be watching. But it seems that the masses are too busy watching Squid Game. This is how old the script was. And to add insult to injury, anyone that dares attempt to pull the veil away from the man behind the curtain is viciously attacked by these dogs and branded with the mark of conspiracy theorist or some other unoriginal moniker, or threatening their meal ticket. Worse still, these monikers and attitudes are perpetuated by the general public that can't discern between honest journalism and the thinly veiled propaganda that they're subjected to every day.
Sustained propaganda. Propaganda.
I think that's a red flag. I don't want to get stabbed.
And for us who are wise to what's going on, it's very hard for us not to hate the drones that proudly parrot the slop that they've acquired from their feeding troughs that day. Particularly when their parroting is so pompous, self-righteous, and zealous, the telltale signs of the truly brainwashed. They are either oblivious or indifferent to the motivations of their sources of truth. As long as they get their slop, they don't care, because all they see is a brand that you can trust, without ever considering where that trust comes from. So, dear reader, if you smell a rat and you start to pull at the threads and get a glimpse of the man behind the curtain, if you dare to speak out against the lies, please don't ever be made to feel bad or crazy for using your own brain from people who haven't had an original thought in their entire lives. I think a lot of people find this paradigm shift into reality so hard to swallow because the sickness is so widespread. It's intimidating. It's cartoonishly evil. It's so absurd that it's hard to believe. Plus, it shakes at the foundations of our lives. We were taught from a very young age, from state-funded schools, by the way, that this entire system and these institutions are crucial for a functioning society, and a prosperous one at that. They must function correctly, right? Otherwise, my mortgage is meaningless. The job I hate going to is even more meaningless. And I'm still going. It has to be okay. It has to be okay, right? I'm gonna go get a McFlurry. Woo! Thanks for watching. If you want to be involved with Sensible Sedition, you want to help out, you want to help with writing, with editing, even just uploading, because I'm terrible at uploading and hashtagging and all that shit. If you want to be involved, drop us a line. If you want to donate so we can buy a real green screen to do more newscasts, that would be cool too. I haven't set up an infrastructure for that, but if you're interested, let us know. If you liked what you saw, you didn't like what you saw, say something in the comments. And remember, bad guys always lose. See you next time. Ugh, that slogan is so cheesy. But you know what? I like cheese.
Sensible sedition. Use your brain and think for yourself. Sensible sedition. You shouldn't blindly trust government. Sensible sedition. Using your brain 'cause you're not as stupid.